The Language of Survival, Shunkun no Gengo, Episode 3, The First Words of War.第3話, Jansou no Saisho no Konchiba, the morning after the T-Rex came and left, carried a particular quality of light. Not gentler, not safer. The prehistoric world had no interest in offering either, but the light that fell across the tribe's territory in the early hours of that morning had the specific quality of something that has been held at maximum tension and has returned, however briefly, to something approaching rest. The tribe moved through it with the quiet, purposeful efficiency of people who understood that the work of survival did not pause for recovery. Structures that the T-Rex's passage had damaged, the windbreaks at the territory's southern edge, two of the lower stone formations that served as boundary markers, needed attention. The Parkers had understood this before anyone asked them. They simply began helping. Act 1. The Work of Trust. Mary Parker worked beside the cavewoman. This had become, in the days since their arrival at the territory, the natural arrangement. Not because it had been negotiated or decided, because the two of them had arrived, independently and simultaneously, at the understanding that the most efficient way to rebuild a windbreak was side by side, with each person reading the other's next move and matching it. They worked without speaking. They did not need to. The cavewoman lifted a heavy stone, and the same casual enormity of effort that had marked every physical task the tribe performed, and positioned it at the base of the damaged structure. Mary positioned the supporting stones around it, reading the angle by watching where the cavewoman's hands had placed the anchor. The feathered dinosaur sat 3 feet behind Mary and watched the process with the attentive, slightly anxious expression it had worn since the previous day's encounter. It was still shaken, a creature with the survival instincts to recognize that what had entered the clearing the previous day occupied a different category from any threat it had previously processed. It had pressed against Mary's leg 3 times during the night. She had led it. When the windbreak section was completed, the cavewoman stood and looked at their work. Then she looked at Mary. She put her fist against her chest, not the open-handed gesture of trust from their first meeting, but something different, something more compact, a warrior's acknowledgement. Mary held her gaze. She put her own fist against her chest. The cavewoman turned and went to the next damaged structure. Mary followed. Across the territory, the Parker family had distributed themselves through the repair work with the same natural, unprompted efficiency. Princess was working with a group of tribe members on the eastern boundary stones, using the physical coordination she had developed across weeks of martial arts training to move heavy materials with the economy of motion that never failed to produce a subtle, involuntary response from anyone watching, a slight recalibration of what they had assumed about what this small-bodied person was capable of. Cassandra worked alone. She had chosen a section of the windbreak far enough from the main activity that she could work in something approaching solitude, which was, by now, understood by everyone who knew her as a preference rather than an absence. She was present. She contributed. She simply required more quiet to do it. Amir was at the perimeter, conducting the quiet, systematic analysis he brought to every new environment, studying the soil composition where the T-Rex's footfalls had left impressions, noting the depth and spacing, running calculations in the way he ran calculations about everything, continuously, precisely, several steps ahead of the immediate moment. The stride length is approximately 4 meters, he said, not to anyone in particular, or rather to whoever happened to be close enough to be useful as a sounding board, which in this case was Amira, working nearby with the focused, compressed efficiency she brought to everything. And the impact depth suggests a body mass of approximately 7 to 8 metric tons, significantly heavier than the Spinosaurus. We know it's heavier, Amira said. We were there. Knowing and measuring are different things, Amir said. If we understand its physical parameters, we can model its movement patterns, predict where it will go. Amira was quiet for a moment. That's actually useful, she said. The words came out with the specific reluctance of someone who had opinions about admitting things were useful. Thank you, Amir said. The 4 brothers worked as a unit at the northern edge of the territory, lifting and placing with their characteristic, synchronized efficiency, the work flowing between them without instruction or discussion, each one anticipating what the others needed before it was needed. Several tribe members had stationed themselves near the brothers specifically, apparently having reached the conclusion that work adjacent to 4 people who moved as a single organism was work that progressed faster. Rashim talked. This was, as always, not a problem and not a feature, simply a constant, like weather. He narrated the repair work as he did it, offered opinions on the best placement of each stone, asked questions of the tribe members working nearby that they could not answer, but received with the particular engaged attention of people who could tell from the tone and gesture that the sound being produced was friendly. Several tribe members had begun responding to Rashim's commentary with vocalizations of their own, creating a kind of bilingual stream of consciousness exchange that communicated nothing in specific terms, and somehow communicated everything in general ones. Prince Parker directed. He had positioned himself at the territory's centre, from which point he could see every repair effort simultaneously, and was issuing instructions in his characteristic fashion. Clear, direct, stripped of every warmth that might soften the efficiency of the directive. No one had assigned him this role. He had assigned himself, which was how Prince Parker operated in every environment. "That stone needs to be 2 feet further left," he said to a group working on the southern boundary. "The feathered animal is in the way of the eastern work," he said. "Move around it. The structure on the north is unstable. The brothers need to reset the base stone before continuing." The tribe members receiving these directives did not understand the words, but Prince Parker's tone and gesture were profoundly clear, the universal language of someone who knows what they're talking about and expects their assessment to be taken seriously. The tribe received him the way they had received everything about the Parkers, as a piece of information about a world they were still constructing, understanding of. Amin Parker carried stone. He had found a section of the damaged boundary on the territory's western edge, and was working through it methodically, lifting and placing with the particular efficient economy of movement that characterized everything he did. He did not direct. He did not narrate. He simply worked, and the section of boundary he was repairing was being rebuilt with a precision and stability that would outlast most of the other sections by decades. He was also watching everything. He always was. The English lesson. Morning. Public. The work had created its own rhythm, and rhythm, in any world, at any point in history, eventually creates its own pause. When the immediate structural work was complete, the tribe gathered at the main fire in the way that groups of people, across all eras and geographies, gather at fires when the immediate task is done and there is breathing room for something other than immediate necessity. Mary Parker was already at the fire. She had moved there with the natural, unhurried ease of water, finding its level, at the centre of gathering, as she always was. The feathered dinosaur had followed her and was now settled at her side, with the specific, settled contentment of a creature that has decided this is where safety lives. Amin sat beside her. He looked at the assembled faces, tribe members distributed around the fire, in the loose, natural arrangement of people who had not yet decided how formally to structure the space. The young man who had first said go was across from him, watching with that particular, focused attention that distinguished him from the others. Not the most physically impressive of the tribe, not the eldest, not the one whose physical authority was most evident, but the one who watched everything with the specific quality of someone who was always running a parallel process of understanding beneath whatever surface activity was happening. He was going to be important. Amin had known it since the first night. "Yesterday," Amin said, slowly, clearly, with the calibrated pace that the past days of teaching had refined, "we faced danger." He pointed toward where the T-Rex had entered the clearing. "The T-Rex! T-Rex!" the young man said immediately. Several other tribe members echoed it, varying degrees of accuracy, but all recognizable. "The T-Rex is danger," Amin continued. "Today, we learn more words that keep us safe." He stood. "Run," he said, and demonstrated. A few quick steps, the body language of urgency and speed. "Run means move fast, move away from danger. Run," the young man said. He demonstrated it himself. The same quick steps. Several tribe members tried it. The word went around the fire. "Hide," Amin said. He dropped to a crouch behind one of the larger stones at the fire's edge, becoming invisible from the other side of it. "Hide means do not be seen." Laughter from the tribe, not at the concept, at the sight of Amin crouching behind a stone. The laughter carried no mockery in it. It was the warm, involuntary sound of people who find something recognizable and slightly absurd at the same time. The young man crouched behind a stone on his side of the fire. "Hide," he said, from behind the stone. More laughter. Amin smiled. "Good. Help," Mary said. She had taken up the thread naturally, moving the lesson forward the way she always moved forward, without announcement, without taking anything from the person who had been leading, simply adding her voice to the flow in the right place at the right moment. She reached out her hand toward Cassandra, an open, requesting gesture. Cassandra took it and drew her gently forward. "Help," Mary said. "Help means I need you." The tribe watched this. The young man looked at Mary's hand, at Cassandra's hand, at the gesture. "Help," he said. He reached his hand toward the tribe member beside him. The other person took it. "Help," he said again. Something in the dynamic at the fire shifted. Not dramatically, not in any way that could be pointed to as a single moment. But the word help moving between two people's hands carried something different from run or hide or danger. Those were survival words. Help was a relationship word. And the tribe felt the difference. By the end of the morning lesson, the young man had produced something that stopped the fire circle. He looked at Mary. He looked at Amin. He looked at the place where the T-Rex had entered the clearing the previous day. And he said, "Danger come fire." 3 words. Broken English, the grammar not yet assembled into its correct architecture. But the meaning was complete and clear, and produced with the deliberate, focused intent of someone who had been assembling those 3 words in his mind since yesterday, and was now setting them free. Danger is coming toward the fire. The warning he would have given, the warning he was practicing giving. Mary looked at him across the fire. "Yes," she said very quietly. "That's exactly right. The Japanese lesson, mid-morning, private." The hunting party left before midday. The cavewoman led it, and she always led the hunts, with the quiet authority of someone for whom leadership was not a role, but a condition. 14 tribe members followed her into the jungle, spears ready, moving with the practiced silence that had evolved over generations in this environment. The territory settled into the rhythms of the non-hunters, the maintenance tasks, the food preparation, the various activities of a settlement's daily life. The Parkers moved, not all at once, that would have been noticeable, in groups of 2 and 3, at intervals, with the casual, unremarkable quality of people going about separate small tasks. Mary and Cassandra went to gather fruit from the trees, at the territory's northern edge. Amin and Princess followed a few minutes later, ostensibly checking the northern boundary stones. Amira followed after them, carrying a bark vessel as if heading to the stream. They assembled at the fruit trees, far enough from the territory's activity that their voices would not carry, close enough that their presence would appear, as ordinary boundary maintenance if observed. Amin sat against the largest tree, the others settled around him, Mary and Cassandra at his left, Princess and Amira at his right. The fruit gathering was real. Each of them was actually gathering fruit. The lesson happened inside the gathering, invisibly woven through it. Tea form, Amin said. In Japanese, teikei. He had introduced this the previous evening. Today was consolidation, the process of taking something that had been shown and driving it from the level of recognition into the level of reflex. Tabaru becomes tabate, he said. To eat becomes eating, having eaten. Miru becomes meat. To see becomes seeing, having seen. Iku becomes ite. To go becomes going, having gone. Ite, Cassandra said. Precisely. The sounds landing exactly where they needed to land. Might, Mary said. Her pronunciation was, as it had been from the first lesson, instinctively close to native. Something about the way she processed sound, the deep musical intelligence that had always made her exceptional at reading emotional registers, translated directly into the ear for language. Tabete, Princess said, fast. Her speed of retention had always been the quality that impressed Amin most. She moved through material at a pace that suggested her mind was always slightly ahead of her mouth, already processing the next item while producing the current one. Amira worked more slowly, not because she was less capable, her comprehension was clear, and her production when it came was accurate. She simply insisted on understanding each piece completely before moving to the next one, the deliberate approach of someone who did not trust things she hadn't verified. Now Masu form, Amin said, Masu ki. This was the polite register, the language of formal address, of speaking to someone whose position requires courtesy. He had chosen to teach it alongside the casual forms because he understood something about language that most people who taught language missed. People learn register before they learn rules. They hear the music before they hear the grammar. Tabamasu, he said. I will eat, politely. Tabamasu, Mary repeated. The politeness landed in her voice, the way politeness always landed in Mary Parker's voice, naturally, without effort, as if she had always known where it lived. They worked through the forms for 20 minutes, T form, Masu form, the beginning threads of Keigo that Amin had begun weaving in alongside the foundation vocabulary. He moved carefully. Japanese honorific language was its own system, with its own architecture, and pushing it too fast would produce confusion. But exposure, early, light, consistent, would make the architecture feel familiar when they arrived at it properly. He listened to each of them, corrected the sounds that needed correcting, confirmed the ones that were landing correctly, moved the lesson forward at the pace set by the slowest person in the group was D, which was on this particular morning Amira, who was working through her frustration at not immediately mastering Kigo's particular verbal register. I understand it conceptually, she said, with the specific edge of someone who considers themselves good at understanding things and is bothered by the gap between understanding and production. The polite form changes the verb ending, but also changes the relationship being encoded in the sentence. It's not just words, it's position. I understand that. Yes, Amin said. I just can't make my mouth do it yet. That's normal, Amin said. Understanding precedes production. Your mouth will catch up. How long? Keep practicing. She said nothing, but she tried the Keigo form again, and on the third attempt, the register shifted. Something in the precision of her attack on the language found the right angle, and the sound that came out was correct. Amin nodded. She gathered fruit and said nothing about it. Cultural exchange. Afternoon. Public. The hunting party returned mid-afternoon with enough food for the territory for 2 days. The distribution of the hunt, the specific protocol by which food was allocated across the tribe, was something the Parkers had been observing since their arrival. The system was efficient and clearly long established. The hunters who had made the kill received first allocation, then the elders of the group, then the working adults, then the perimeter guards. It was not discussed or negotiated. It simply happened in the same order, every time. The Parkers had been given a portion from the first day, not the hunters' allocation, but not the last, somewhere in the middle, which was, it seemed, where the tribe had placed them, not hunters, not yet. Their position on that was still being evaluated, but not peripheral either. Present, participating, worth feeding with the same consideration given to the settlement's working members. After the distribution, before the cooking began, the cave woman brought the Parkers to the territory's edge. She crouched at the soft earth there and produced a tool, a sharpened piece of flint that served as a drawing implement, and made a mark in the ground, a shape that required understanding of the territory to read, the curve of the ridgeline, the position of the river, the location of the main fire. She pointed to her eye, then to the territory, then to the marks. This is what I see. This is how I see it. She made another mark, further from the existing ones, a different shape, something moving. She pointed south. Mary sat beside her. She studied the marks for a moment, then she pointed to the moving shape. Animal, she said. The cave woman looked at her. Mary made her hands into the shape of a large creature walking. Animal? The cave woman watched this. Then she made the same gesture, but she added something to it. Her hands moved, and then her face changed, the specific, total transformation of a face that has shifted into the register of something that is not just an animal. This one is different from the usual animals. The feathered dinosaur beside Mary made a sound. The cave woman looked at it, then at the mark in the dirt, then at the feathered dinosaur. She said one word, in her language, that none of the Parkers understood. But the feathered dinosaur's response, the way its feathers rose along its spine, and its head dropped to the low warning position, translated it perfectly. The mark in the dirt was the T-Rex. The T-Rex has been here before, Princess said quietly. Not loudly enough for the exchange to seem alarmed, but clearly enough for the family to hear. It has a pattern, Amir said, from behind her. His voice carried the same thoughtful, analytical quality it always carried when he was running data through the framework he had been building since Amin's teaching had given them the shared language for it. If the cave woman is showing us where it appeared on the map, she's been tracking it, which means she has data on its movement, which means she can predict where it will go, Cassandra said. Yes, Amir said. The cave woman, watching the Parkers exchange this rapid back and forth, seemed to understand that something useful was being processed, even if she couldn't access the content. She added another mark to the drawing. A path. A direction. Left, right, stop, come, she said. The English words, learned from the previous day's lessons, produced carefully, with the same deliberate quality the young man used. Left, Amin confirmed, pointing to demonstrate direction. Left, she said. She used it immediately, pointing south and to the left. The T-Rex came from the left. Right, she said, pointing to a different part of the drawing, and moved to the right. She had taken 4 words from the previous day's lesson and was using them now to construct a factual account of a predator's movement through her territory. The Parker family looked at each other. They're not just learning words, Princess said quietly. They're learning how to think in the words they're learning. That's what language acquisition is, Amir said. When the grammar follows the cognition reorganizes itself around the new structural possibilities. She isn't just repeating, she's applying. Which means, Mary said, that the faster we teach, the faster they can share information with us that we need. Yes, Amir said, precisely. Act 2, The Shadow Returns. The footprints were discovered by Nisa. He had been conducting the quiet perimeter check that the 4 brothers had taken on as their specific contribution to the territory's security, moving along the boundary at a pace slow enough to read the ground carefully, looking for the specific signs that, in the weeks since their arrival in this world, had become as legible to them as text. He stopped at the river's edge. He did not call out. He simply stopped, crouched, and studied. Nishim arrived beside him without being signalled. Then Nimir, then Shahim. The 4 of them crouched together at the riverbank, looking at what Nisa had found. Footprints. The impressions were unmistakable, not the track of anything the territory normally produced. The depth of each depression, the spacing, the geometry of the mark left by the specific anatomy of a foot, that had evolved for a different purpose than any of the animals that normally came to this water source. The T-Rex had been here. Recently. The ground was still soft around the impressions, which meant rain had not reached them yet, which meant the tracks were no older than a day. Shahim pointed upstream. A different sign. A section of riverbank vegetation that had been crushed under something enormous, not swept away by water, but pressed down by weight. 2 trees had been pushed aside, their trunks bent at angles that required considerable lateral force, and further upstream, visible from where they crouched, the remains of a large herbivore. What had been a fully grown animal was now a collection of remnants that told the story of an apex predator in unambiguous terms. The feathered dinosaur, when it registered the smell from downwind, made a sound unlike any sound it had made before, a low, sustained vocalization that was somewhere between a call and a warning, and something for which human language had no adequate word. Nisa stood. He walked back to the territory at the pace he always walked, not running, not alarmed in any visible way, with the specific, practiced calm of someone who has understood that panic is a resource drain and accuracy of communication is more valuable than speed of communication. He went to Amin. He said 2 words. In the family's growing private vocabulary, 2 words were sufficient. Amin looked at him, then in the direction Nisa had indicated. Then he went to Mary. Mary received the information the way she received everything, not from behind the glass of analysis, but directly, with full emotional and practical registration. She looked at the riverbank. She looked at the feathered dinosaur, which had moved to press against her leg the moment Nisei returned. She looked at the jungle to the south. "It's been circling," she said. "Yes," Amir said beside her. He had been listening, processing, his mind already running the new data through the model he had been building. Not attacking. Mapping. Large carnivores who are establishing territory engage in boundary mapping before committing to active pursuit of prey within that territory. It's learning the edges of what's here. "Learning our patterns," Princess said. "Yes. Our fire, our activity hours, our movement within the territory." "Which means," Cassandra said, her voice carrying the particular quiet that it always carried when she was saying something she had arrived at before anyone else had finished asking the question, "it's been watching us longer than we've known." Silence. The feathered dinosaur made its low, sustained sound again. Mary placed her hand on it. "We need to tell the tribe," she said. "They already know," Amin said. They all looked at him. He was watching the cavewoman who had emerged from the tree line at the territory's northern edge and was moving toward the main fire with the particular quality of someone who has returned from seeing something and is carrying what they've seen. She reached the fire. She looked at Mary. She picked up a piece of sharpened flint and crouched beside the soft earth near the fire's edge. She drew a circle. Then she drew a slash through it. She pointed south. Then she said, carefully, deliberately, with the full weight of her expanding English vocabulary, the word she had learned that morning. "Danger." English lesson interrupted. Afternoon. The evening English lesson had begun with a specific momentum. The tribe was gathered at the main fire with the focused energy of people who had understood, after the T-Rex encounter, that language was not an abstract acquisition, but a survival tool. The young man was at the front of the group, as he always was now, not formally, not by anyone's assignment, but because he was consistently the first to arrive, and the others oriented toward his presence, the way groups orient toward the member whose attention most reliably signals where the important thing is happening. Amin was teaching directional commands, north, south, east, west, working with a combination of the compass directions and the gesture system that had been developing alongside the English words as a parallel track. "North," he said, pointing. "North," the tribe repeated. "Sooth, sooth. This is useful for the warning system," Amir said quietly to Mary beside him. "If we can establish compass directions in the shared vocabulary, the cavewoman's terrain maps become communicable to us without drawing every time." "South is where the T-Rex came from," the young man said. He said it in his broken building English, the grammar still rough, the words arriving in the sequence that made sense to his understanding of the language rather than the sequence that standard English grammar required, but the content was precise. "South, T-Rex, origin point." "Yes," Amin said. "South is where the T-Rex came from." The young man looked at the jungle to the south. "T-Rex, come south," he said. Then, working through it, adding the missing piece of temporal information, "T-Rex, come south again?" The question landed in the gathering with the particular weight of a question that everyone has been running silently, and no one has asked aloud yet. Amin looked at him. "We prepare," he said. "We watch. We learn." He did not say yes. He did not say no. Both would have been inaccurate. He said what was true. The young man held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded. Once, the same quality of nod the Parker family produced, when something important had been understood, without requiring more elaboration. The jungle went silent. It happened in the space of 2 seconds. The ambient sound of the prehistoric world, the background hum of insects and distant animal calls that was so constant it had become the silence they lived inside, simply stopped. The feathered dinosaur froze. The ground did not shake. Not yet. Not the earthquake footfall rhythm of yesterday's arrival. Just a faint, barely perceptible resonance. The kind that was not yet a sound, but was the precursor to one. The T-Rex was not attacking. But it was close. The tribe read it, in the silence, in the feathered dinosaur's response, in the cavewoman's posture shifting from the open engagement of the lesson into something more contained. The spears came up slowly. Not the aggressive, active readiness of an imminent confrontation. The calibrated alertness of people who had lived in this world long enough to know the difference between a predator preparing to attack and a predator conducting reconnaissance. Everyone was still, listening. The resonance held for 30 seconds. Then it shifted direction, moving, faint, perceptible only in the quality of stillness, rather than in any actual vibration. Moving westward along the territory's southern boundary, and then gone. Not retreated. Gone. The sound signature of something that had moved past rather than away. The cavewoman lowered her spear. Slowly. She said something to the tribe, brief, specific, and 3 tribe members immediately moved to the southern perimeter. She turned to Mary. "Watch," she said. The English word, learned and deployed with precision. "It watch us." Mary held her gaze. "Yes," she said, "it is watching. The Japanese emergency lesson, late afternoon, private, urgent. The ridge behind the territory, the three watchers who had been posted there by the cave woman, maintaining their observation. The other tribe members clustered at the main fire, with the specific directed energy of people who had been told to stay visible and present as a way of demonstrating to a circling predator that the territory was occupied and aware. Amin gathered the entire Parker family. All of them. This was unusual. The private lessons had typically been conducted in smaller groups to reduce the visibility of any single large group departure from the territory. But the situation had changed, and the calculus had changed with it. They moved to the ridge path in the same staggered fashion they always used, not all at once, not in a single group, but in pairs and threes over the space of 5 minutes, each pair going for ostensibly different reasons that any watching eye would have found individually unremarkable. They assembled at the ridge's first flat section, out of sight of the territory's main area. Amin looked at his family. "The T-Rex is not waiting," he said, in Japanese, direct. "It is learning, and when it has learned enough, it will commit." The family listened. "If that attack comes while we are in the middle of a lesson, in the center of the tribe's territory, there will be no time for extended communication. We will need to coordinate without the tribe understanding what we are saying." He produced the first phrase. "Niguro," he said. Nigiru, run. He had chosen this phrase specifically, not hashiru, which was also a form of run, but the imperative nigiru, the command form that carried urgency in its very structure, the version of run that you say when every second matters. "Niguro," the family repeated. All of them, including Prince Parker, who produced the phrase with the particular hard-edged accuracy of someone who has applied the same demanding standards to Japanese phonology that he applied to everything else. "Abunai," Amin said. "Abunai. Danger. Abunai." "Kotsuchi-he," he said. "Kochi-e. This way. Kotsuchi-he." He worked through the phrases 3 times at full pace, not pausing, not explaining, simply delivering and receiving. Speed was the point. These were not vocabulary items for study. These were reflexes being installed. The difference was the pace at which they were delivered and received. "Again," he said. "Nigero abunai, kotsuchi-he." Again. "Nigero abunai, kotsuchi-he." The 4 brothers produced them in absolute unison, not because they had coordinated to do so, but because synchronized production was simply how they processed. Their voices arrived at exactly the same moment, in exactly the same quality, with exactly the same timing. Amin noted this. "If you hear me say Negoro," Hal said, "I need each of you to move immediately, not after processing, not after evaluating, immediately, in the direction I have indicated with Kotsuchi-he. If Cassandra says Abunai, treat it with the same urgency as if I had said it." He looked at Cassandra specifically when he said this. She held his gaze. "The tribe will not understand these words," he continued. "They will hear sounds they have not been taught." "Which is why we have not taught them, and will not teach them. What they see will be the family moving with coordination and purpose. In a real emergency, that is what they need to see from us anyway." "What if the attack comes before we've drilled these enough?" Amira asked. In Japanese, her T form was already improving. "Then we use what we have," Amin said, "which is why we drill now." They ran the phrases again, and again, and again, until the sounds were no longer being produced consciously, but were arriving from somewhere below conscious production, from the place where the T form and the Masu form and the morning's vocabulary were accumulating, becoming not knowledge about Japanese, but knowledge in Japanese. The tribe at the territory below continued their vigil. They heard nothing from the ridge. Act 3. Language as strategy. When the family returned to the territory, staggered in pairs, as unremarkably as they had left, the cave woman was at the main fire. She was not teaching, and she was not performing any of the settlement's maintenance tasks. She was sitting with the focused stillness of someone conducting an inventory, going through something, recounting, preparing. When Mary sat beside her, the cave woman looked at her. She picked up the sharpened flint. In the soft earth beside the fire, she drew the territory, then the southern boundary, then an arrow, pointing inward, the T-Rex's direction of approach. She drew a second arrow, diverging from the first. A fork. It could come from this direction instead. Then a third, diverging from the second. Or this one. She looked at Mary. "It has options. It is choosing." Mary studied the drawing. "Amin," she said. He had been nearby, as he always was nearby when Mary might need him. She pointed to the drawing. "Can you tell what direction it will come from? Based on what the brothers found at the river." Amin crouched beside the drawing. He studied it for a moment, and then he added a mark, not a new element, but a specification of an existing one. He drew a small circle at a specific point along the southern boundary. He pointed to the river, then to the footprints Nisia had reported, then to the circle. The most recent tracks were here. The crushed vegetation was upstream. The path of travel moved in this direction. The cave woman looked at his addition to the map. Something shifted in her expression. The specific quality of someone who is receiving. Information that confirms a calculation they have already run, but weren't certain of. She added her own mark, confirming his, extending it slightly, adding the detail of a narrow gap in the southern tree line, through which the marks resolved into a most probable approach direction. Southwest. Not due south. Southwest. Amin looked at her.
She looked at him. Between them, in the drawing in the soft earth, a conversation had just occurred that required neither English nor Japanese. He turned to the family. Southwest, he said, in English for the tribe's benefit, planting the direction in the shared vocabulary while simultaneously communicating it to his family. The T-Rex is most likely to approach from the southwest. Southwest, the young man said. He had been watching. He was always watching. Danger comes southwest. Yes, Amin said. The shared warning system. The last teaching of the day was the most practical. Amin stood at the fire with the young man beside him and the assembled tribe and family around them. Run, he said. He pointed to the tribe, to the family, to the jungle, to the territory. When I say run, everyone runs. To the caves. North. He demonstrated a few quick steps in the direction of the cave entrances, then back. Run. Caves. North. Together. Run caves north together, the young man said. Amin showed him the English word one more time. Run. Run. Run, the young man said to the assembled tribe. He pointed toward the caves, made the quick-step gesture of someone moving with urgency. The tribe understood. They did not need more repetition. They had lived their entire lives in an environment where the difference between understanding a warning quickly and understanding it slowly was measured in very specific terms. Several tribe members immediately produced the word themselves, testing it, running it through the vocal apparatus, connecting it to the gesture and the direction and the meaning. Run, run. The cavewoman watched this. Then she stood. She made a hand gesture, flat hand, fingers together, a sharp downward press. She held it. She looked at Mary. Mary did not know the gesture, but she read the cavewoman's body language, the stillness, the specific quality of absolute alertness, and produced an interpretation. Hide, she said. The cavewoman showed her the gesture again, then pointed to the earth, then to the forest, then made the gesture again at chest height. When I make this signal, go low, go still, disappear. Hide, Mary said. She made the gesture back. The cavewoman nodded. This is the first bilingual survival system, Amir said quietly to no one in particular. English for the verbal commands, their gesture language for the visual signals, both operating simultaneously, each carrying what the other cannot. Princess looked at him. You've been waiting to say that, she said. I've been thinking it since the hand gesture appeared, he confirmed. Japanese mastery. Eveninged. The tribe settled into its nighttime rhythms. Fires banked, watchers posted, the settlement's breathing becoming the slower, quieter breathing of a group transitioning into rest while maintaining the edge of alertness that this particular night required. The Parker family had gathered at the territory's northern edge. Amin moved through them one by one, not a group lesson, but individual assessment. The quality of attention he brought to each person was complete and specific. He was not evaluating their progress against an abstract standard, but against their individual capacity and rate of development. He went to Mary first. He produced a Japanese sentence, mid-complexity, T-form construction with a directional element. Mizu o tekite kuremasu ka? Will you get the water for me? Mary produced it back. The pronunciation was close to perfect. The Keigo register, the polite request form that the sentence was built in, was present and correct. The intonation pattern landed naturally. Amin looked at her. Very good, he said in Japanese. She smiled. He went to Cassandra. He gave her a more complex sentence, one that required te form, a directional particle, and a temporal element embedded. A sentence designed to test whether she had moved the grammar to the level of application or still needed to construct it consciously. She produced it immediately. No pause. No visible processing. The sentence arrived complete and correct from somewhere below the level where conscious construction happens. He held her gaze. You're further along than you think you are. She understood. He went to Princess, who had, as he had observed throughout the day, the fastest memorization speed in the family. She could take new vocabulary and produce it accurately in a shorter interval than anyone else. He gave her a rapid-fire sequence of vocabulary items that built on the day's grammar work. She kept up, perfectly, even anticipating one of the items before he had fully produced it, hearing the beginning of the construction and completing it herself. You heard the pattern, he said. 2 days ago, she said, he went to Amir, whose comprehension had always been the strongest element of his Japanese acquisition. He tested it today with a longer spoken passage, delivered at normal conversational speed without pause, and then asked Amir to describe what he had heard. Amir's description was accurate in every substantive detail, not word for word, but the meaning fully received and correctly reproduced. Your comprehension is at a different level from your production, Amin said. I know, Amir said. The grammar is clearer to me in reception than in generation. I understand it as a system. The generation requires the system to become automatic rather than deliberate. That takes more time. Keep practicing the generation, Amin said. The system is already there. He went to the 4 brothers, who, as always, he tested as a unit. He gave them a sequence of emergency phrases and asked for coordinated simultaneous production at full speed. They produced them, together, as if one voice. He went to Prince Parker last. Prince was standing with his characteristic posture, the one that communicated that he was participating, but had not surrendered his position as someone whose participation was voluntary, rather than required. Amin had learned to read the difference between Prince's genuine resistance and Prince's performed resistance. And this was performed. He was here because he had chosen to be here. The posture was for his own benefit, not for anyone else's. Amin produced a sentence. In Keigo, the formal register, the language of someone speaking with respect to someone whose position requires it. Prince listened. He produced it back. The sound was not perfect. His pronunciation had a harder edge than the language preferred, the consonants landing with more force than Keigo's gentle register called for. But the structure was correct and the meaning was complete. Amin said nothing. He simply moved to the next test. Prince Parker, without announcing it, tried the sentence again, softer this time, the consonants slightly released, the edge pulled back. Better. He did not acknowledge that he had tried again. He simply held the revised production in his expression, watching to see if Amin had noticed. Amin had noticed. He moved on without comment. Some forms of progress were better received without observation. Nightfall. The valley went quiet in stages. First the insects, which always diminished when the temperature dropped. Then the distant calls of the larger creatures, which shifted register from the daytime territorial assertions to the quieter, more cautious communications of nocturnal navigation. Then, finally, the specific quality of darkness that the prehistoric night produced. An absolute, total dark unfiltered by any artificial source, broken only by the tribe's carefully maintained fires. Mary Parker sat at the main fire. The feathered dinosaur was pressed against her side, not the anxious pressing of the post-T-Rex evening, but the settled, comfortable pressing of a creature that has decided this is where it belongs. It had eaten well from the day's hunt. It was warm. The fire was between it and the direction from which danger had come. It was as safe as this world allowed. The cavewoman sat across the fire. She was not sleeping. Her role as the territory's primary watchperson appeared to require less sleep than most of the tribe, or to require sleep at different times, distributed differently through the day. She was watching the darkness beyond the fire's reach. Mary watched her watch. She never stops, Princess said quietly, settling beside Mary. Even when she's resting, she's watching. She's been doing this her whole life, Mary said. I know. I'm not criticizing it. I'm learning from it. Mary looked at her daughter. What are you learning? That vigilance doesn't have to look like tension, Princess said. She's completely alert and completely calm at the same time. I used to think those were opposites. Mary was quiet for a moment. They become the same thing, she said, when you've practiced long enough. The roar came without warning. Not from the south. Not from the direction the cavewoman's map had indicated as the most probable approach. From the east, which was the second possible approach vector Amin had marked, the one that diverged from the primary. It has options. It is choosing. The roar rolled through the valley like something geological rather than biological, too deep, too resonant, too enormous to have come from a single living thing. It bounced off the ridge face and came back diminished but still present, a rolling echo of itself. The tribe was on its feet in the time it took the echo to return. The feathered dinosaur was pressed flat against the ground, directly under Mary's hand. The Parkers were in formation. The cavewoman was at the territory's eastern edge with her spear raised, reading the direction of the sound with the precise, calibrated attention of someone for whom directional hearing was a practiced survival skill. She held still. Everyone held still. Listening. The roar had come from outside the territory, from the jungle, from the eastern tree line, somewhere in the darkness beyond the firelight's reach. It was not inside, it was not attacking, it was announcing. In the moonlight that had risen above the ridge, at the eastern tree line's edge, where the prehistoric jungle met the territory's cleared boundary, something stood. It was visible for 3 seconds before it moved back into the trees. 3 seconds was sufficient. The T-Rex stood at the boundary line, not advancing, not retreating, standing with the specific, particular quality of something that has arrived at a chosen point and is assessing what it has arrived at. Its eyes caught the firelight from across the territory. 2 reflections, enormous, the amber green of deep animal intelligence, looking at something it has decided to understand before it decides to take. It looked at the fires. It looked at the tribe's formation. Spears up, bodies organised, the defensive configuration of a group that had prepared. It looked at the 12 smaller figures arranged within the formation. It looked at Amin Parker, who stood at the formation's edge with his characteristic, absolute stillness. And it roared. Once, one long, deep territorial declaration that rolled across the cleared ground and reached every living thing in the territory. In the caves, at the fires, in the sleeping areas, deep in the feathered dinosaur's ancient nervous system, deep in the ancient and recently stripped-down nervous systems of 12 beings who had once been something else and were now simply people in a dangerous world. The roar said something that required no translation into any language. I know where you are. I know your patterns. I know your fires and your formation and your boundary. I will return, on my terms, when I am ready. Then the darkness took it. The eastern tree line closed. The sound diminished. The territory held its breath. Held it, until Amin lowered his hands from the ready position, until the cave woman lowered her spear, until the feathered dinosaur pressed against Mary's leg made the slow transition from frozen vigilance to merely alert. The young man looked across the fire at Mary. T-Rex come again? He asked. Mary looked at the eastern tree line. At the darkness where something enormous had stood and looked at them and chosen to leave rather than advance. Yes, she said, it will come again. We ready? The young man said. He didn't say it as a question, he said it as a statement, as the beginning of a decision. Mary looked at him. Yes, she said, we will be ready. The fire burned, the valley breathed, and somewhere in the eastern jungle, moving through the ancient dark at its own pace and by its own calculation, the T-Rex continued its circuit of the territory it had identified, learning, choosing its moment. The language of survival in this world was not only spoken in words. End of episode 3, the first words of war. 生存の言語と戦争の言葉、T-Rex が来てちゃった戦は敵の不幸を生んでいた。より穏やかではない。より安全でもない。太古の世界はそのいずれかを提供することに全く関心がなかった。しかし、その朝の初めの時間に、部族の領域に降り注いだ光は、最大の緊張状態で保持されていた何かが、しかし一時的に急速に近いものに戻ったという特定の質を持っていた。部族は静かで、目的を持った効率で、生存の作業は回復のために一時停止しないことを理解している人々の効率で、それを通り抜けて動いた。パーカー家族は誰かに頼まれる前に助け始めていた。第一幕、信頼の仕事。パーカー・メアリーは洞窟樹の利根で働いた。これは彼らが領域に到着してからの日々に自然な取り決めになっていた。交渉されたからでも決定されたからでもない。なぜなら二人が独立に同時に風貌を最も効率的に再建する方法は並んで、お互いの次の動きを読み、それに合わせることであるという理解に到達していたから。彼女たちは話さずに働いた。必要がなかった。羽のある恐竜は、パーカー・メアリーの3フィート後ろに座り、前日の遭遇の後にずっとしていた。注意深い、少し不安な表情でプロセスを観察した。作業が完了したとき、洞窟女王は立ち上がり、作業を見た。 それからパーカー・メアリーを見た。彼女は拳を胸に当てた。最初の出会いの開いた手の信頼のジェスチャーではなく、しかしね、何か異なるもの。より小型のもの。戦士の証人。パーカー・メアリーは彼女の目を保持した。自分の拳を胸に当てた。領域全体で、パーカー家族は同じ自然な流されない効率で修繕作業に分散していた。パーカープリンセスは冷やしの境界石のグループで働いていた。ブラウン・カサンドラは一人で働いた。チェンバース・アメアは境界で静かな系統的な分析を行っていた。歩幅は約4メートルだと彼は言った。特に誰にでもなく、または近くに有用な共鳴板として偶然いる誰にでも、そして衝撃の深さは約7から8メトリックトンの体質量を示唆している。スピノサウルスより大幅に重い。重いことは知っているとキャンベル・アミラーは言った。そこにいたから。知ることと測ることは違うとチェンバース・アメアは言った。物理的なパラメーターを理解すれば動きのパターンをモデル化できる。どこに行くかを予測できる。キャンベル・アミラーはしばらく静かだった。それは実際に有用だと彼女は言った。役立つことを認めることについての意見を持つ誰かの特定のシブリューさで、ユン兄弟は発端でユニットとして働いた。指示や議論なしに彼らの間を流れる作業で、パーカー・ラシームは話した。パーカー・プリンスは指示した。パーカー・アミンは石を運んだ。彼はまたすべてを見ていた。常にそうだった。英語の授業、朝5回。昨日とパーカー・アミンは言った。ゆっくりとはっきりと。私たちは危険に直面した T-Rex。T-Rex と若い男はすぐに言った。T-Rex は危険だとパーカー・アミンは続けた。今日私たちはより多くの言葉を学ぶ。私たちを安全に保つ言葉だ。すれと彼は言い実演した。いくつかの素早いステップ。緊急性と速度の体の言語。run は早く動くことを意味する。危険から離れて動く。run と若い男は言った。同じ素早いステップを自分で実演した。hide 隠れる。とパーカー・アミンは言い、火のそばの大きな後ろにしゃがんだ。hide は見えないことを意味する。部族から笑いが起こった。概念へではなく、石の後ろにしゃがむパーカー・アミンの光景に、若い男は火の反対側の石の後ろにしゃがんだ。はいと彼は石の後ろから言った。Help 助けてとパーカー・メアリーは言った。彼女はブラウン・カサンドラに向かって手を伸ばした。開いた。要求するジェスチャー。ブラウン・カサンドラは彼女の取り、彼女を穏やかに前に引いた。Help はあなたが必要という意味だ。若い男は彼らの手を見た。それから隣の部族のメンバーに手を伸ばした。Help と彼は言った。授業の終わりには赤い男が火の輪を止めた何かを生み出した。パーカー・メアリーを見た。パーカー・アミンを見た。T-Rex が前日入った場所を見た。To danger come fire。産後。壊れた英語。しかし意味は完全で明確だった。危険が火に向かってきパーカー・メアリーは日越しに彼を見た。Yes! はいと彼女は言った。とても静かに。それはまさに正しい日本語の授業、午前中、仮のパーティーは正午に出発した。洞窟女がついた彼女がいつも狩りをしているように、指導者のための役割ではなく、条件の誰かの静かな権威で、パーカー家族は動いた。全員一度にではない。それは目立つ。2人と3人のグループで間隔を置いて、パーカー・メアリーとブラウン・カサンドラは領域の発端の木から果物を集めに行った。パーカー・アミンとパーカー・プリンセスは数分後に続いた。キャンベル・アミラーは川に向かうようにバーク容器を持って続いた。果物の木で集まった。活動から十分に遠く声が届かない。パーカー・アミンは最大の木に座った。てこだちと彼は日本語で言った。食べるは食べてになると彼は言った。見るは見てに、行くは行く、行ってに。行ってとブラウン・カサンドラは言った正確に。見てとパーカー・メアリーは言った。彼女の発音はネイティブに近かった。最初の授業からそうだった。食べとパーカー・プリンセスは言った。 早く。キャンベル・アミラーはより慎重に取り組んだ。今、マスカッチとパーカー・アミンは言った。食べますと彼は言った。丁寧に話す。礼儀正しく食べます。食べますとパーカー・メアリーは繰り返した。礼儀さはでさ、彼女の声に自然に着地した。パーカー・メアリーの声に礼儀さが常に着地するように、敬語も教えているとキャンベル・アミラーは言った。それを概念的に理解していること。そして彼女の口がまだそれを実行できないことに苛立った誰かの特定のエッジで、理解が生産より先行するとパーカー・アミンは言った。あなたの口が追いつく。どのくらいで？練習し続けて。彼女は何も言わなかった。しかし、敬語形をもう3回試みた。3回目の試みで登録がシフトした。彼女の言語への攻撃の精密さが正しい角度を見つけ、出てきた音は正確だった。パーカー・アミンはうずいた。彼女は果物を集め、それについて何も言わなかった。文化交仮のパーティーは午後中頃に戻った。部族との食料の分配の後、洞窟ジョドはパーカー家族を領域の端に連れて行った。彼女はしゃがんで印を作った。地形の地図、オコン線の曲線、川の位置、主要な火の場所。彼女は目を座さした。それから領域を、それから主事を。これが私が見るもの。これが私がどのように見るか。別の種子を作った。既存のものからさらに遠く。異なる形。何かが動いている。波をさした。パーカー・メアリーは彼女の隣に座った。アニマ物と彼女は言った。洞窟女は同じジェスチャーを作った。しかし何かを加えた。彼女の手が動いた。それから顔が変わった。通常の動物では何かに変わった登録に、羽のある恐竜はそれを見た。それから土の種子を見た。Danger come south! 危険が南から来ると若い音は言った。波は危険だとパーカー・アミンは言った。彼は英語で言った。部族の共有語彙に方向を植え付けながら、T-Rex come south again! T-Rex が再び何から来ると若い音は尋ねた。We prepare 準備するとパーカー・アミンは言った。We watch We learn パイオトはしばらく彼を見た。それからぞいた。重要なことがより成功にする必要なしに理解されたときに、パーカー家族が生み出すのと同じ質のオナスキ。left, right, stop, come 来てと洞窟女王は言った。前日学んだ英語の言葉、慎重に展開された。left とパーカー・アミンは確認した。彼女はすぐに使ったニャミを、そして左を指さした。T-Rex は左から来た。right と彼女は言い別の方向を指さした。洞窟女は4つの言葉より捕食者の動きについての事実の説明を構築するために使っていた。彼女たちは単に言葉を学んでいるだけではないとパーカープリンセスは静かに言った。彼女たちは学んでいる言葉で考える方法を学んでいる。Send Pine 第2幕影が戻る。足跡はパーカー・ニシールが発見した。三眼で止まった。呼びかけなかった。単純に止まり、しゃがみ、研究した。パーカー・ニシームが信号なしに隣に到着した。それからパーカー・ニールル。それからシャヒーム。4人は三眼でしゃがんで、パーカー・ニシールが見つけたものを見た。足や T-Rex がここにいた。最近地面はまだなだらかかった。つまり、雨はまだそこに届いていなかった。それは足跡が1日より古くないことを意味した。川流ではより大きな草食動物の残骸、羽のある恐竜が株下からの匂いを感知したとき、以前作ったことのない音を作った。呼び声と警告と人間の言語が適切な言葉を持たない何かの間のどこかにある低い持続したボーカル。パーカー・ニシールは立った。領域に歩いた。常に歩く速度で走らず目に見える方法で警戒せず、パーカー・アミンのところへ行った。2号言った。家族の成長する秘密の語彙で2号は十分だった。パーカー・アミンは彼を見た。それからパーカー・ニシールが示した方向を見た。それからパー・メアリーのところへ行った。パーカー・メアリーは情報を受け取った。分析のガラスの後ろからではなく、直接、完全な感情的で実際的な登録で科学層を見た。 羽のある恐竜を見た。パーカーにシールが戻った瞬間に足に押し付けるために動いていた波のジャングルを見た。それは周回していると彼女は言った。はいとチェンバース・アメアは隣で言った。攻撃していない。マッピングしている。大型の肉食動物が縄張りを確立しているものは、その縄張りの餌への積極的にコミットする前に境界マッピングに従事する。私たちのパターンを学んでいると、パーカープリンセスは言った。私たちの活動時間、領域内での動き。つまり、とブラウンカゾラは言った。誰も質問を終えていない前に到達した答えを言うときに、常にある特定の静かさを持って、私たちが知っているより長く、私たちを見ていた。沈黙。部族に伝える必要があるとパーカー・メアリーは言った。彼らはすでに知っているとパーカー・アミンは言った。全員が彼を見た。洞窟ジョンが北のキビドのラインから現れ、何かを見て戻ってきた。誰かの特定の質で主要な火に向かって動いていた。彼女は火に到着した。パーカー・メアリーを見た。尖ったくずを拾った。火のそばの柔らかい土の隣に円を描いた。それからスラッシュを描いた。闇を刺した。Danger! 英語授業が中断される。午後、North とパーカー・アミンは言い刺さした。North と部族は繰り返した。South, East, West。危険から逃げるのに方向が必要だとチェンバース・アメアはパーカー・メアリーの隣で静かに言った。英語でコンパスの方向を確立できれば、洞窟所の地形図は毎回焼くことなく私たちに伝達可能になる。T-Rex、South Rex は南から来た、と若い子は言った。T-Rex は南から来た、とパーカー・アミンは言った。T-Rex come south again. T-Rex 再び南から来る赤い子は尋ねた。We prepare, we watch, we learn. ジャングルが沈黙した。2秒の空間で起こった。バックグラウンドの音が止まった。羽のある恐竜が凍った。地面は振動しなかった。ただ、かすかな本土近くできない共鳴。T-Rex は攻撃していなかった。しかし近かった。部族はそれを読んだ。沈黙の中で、羽のある恐竜の反応の中で、洞窟上の姿勢が授業の開かれた関与から何かより含まれたものにシフトした中で、共鳴は30秒保持された。それから方向がシフトした。動いて、かすかで領域の南境界に沿って西に。それから消えた。洞窟女は槍をゆっくりと下げた。部族に何かを言った。二角特定。そして3人の部族のメンバーがすぐに南の境界に移動した。パーカー・メアリーに向いた。Watch 見ると彼女は言った。It watch us それは私たちを見ている。Yes はいとパーカー・メアリーは言った。It is watching それは見ている。日本語緊急授業午後遅く大根は必要なカバーを提供した。パーカー・アミンはパーカー家族全員を集めた。これは珍しかった。秘密の授業は通常単一の大きなグループの出発の可視性を減らすために小さなグループで行われていた。しかし、状況が変わり、計算も変わった。彼らはお念の道に向かって同じ段階的な方法で動いた。一度に全員ではなく5分間にわたって2人と3人のペアで。尾根の最初の平らなセクションで集まった。パーカー・アミンは家族を見た。T-Rex は待っていない。と彼は日本語で言った。直接に、それは学んでいる。そして十分に学んだとき、コミットするだろう。家族は聞いた。もしその攻撃が授業の末中に来たら領域の中心で部族が理解せずに調整する必要があるかもしれない。最初のフレーズを生み出した。逃げろと彼は言った。Run! 逃げろと家族は繰り返した。全員、パーカープリンスを含めて、危ない。と彼は言った。危ない。danger. こっちへ。こっちと彼は言った。this way. こっちへ。サンクルペースフレーズを繰り返した。もう一度。逃げろ。こっちへ。もう一度。逃げろ。危ない。There is still. ヤン兄弟は完全なユニゾンで生み出した。一つの声のように。逃げろを聞いたら、と彼は言った。処理してから動くのではなく、評価してからでもなくすぐに動いてほしい。 こっちへで示した方向に。カサンドラが危ないと言ったら、私が言ったのと同じ緊急性で扱えるカサナを見た。彼女は彼の目を保持した。部族はこれらの言葉を理解しないと彼は続けた。彼らは教えられていない音を聞くだろう。だから教えていないし、教えない。彼らが見るのは調整と目的を持って動く家族だ。本物の緊急事態ではそれが彼らが私たちに見る必要があるものでもある。攻撃がこれを十分に繰り返す前に来たらとキャンベル・アミラーは日本語で尋ねた。手形がすでに改善されていた。その場合は持っているものを使う。とアミンは言った。だから今繰り返す。再びフレーズを実行した。何度も。部族は領域で右りを続けた。何も聞こえなかった。戦略としての言語、家族が領域に戻ったとき、段階的にペアで、洞窟女は主要な日にいた。パーカー・メアリーが隣に座ったとき、洞窟女は彼女を見た。尖った薬を拾った。火のそばの土に領域を描いた。それから南の境界を。それから矢印。内側を指す。T-Rex のアプローチの方向。別の矢印を描いた。最初のものから分岐した。代わりにこちることもできる。それから3番目、またはこちらから。パーカー・メアリーを見た。選択肢がある。選んでいる。パーカー・アミン、彼女の地図の追加を研究した。それから彼自身の印を加えた。新しい要素ではなく既存のものの使用。南の境界の特定の点に小さな円を描いた。川を刺した。それから足跡に。それから円に。洞窟上は彼の地図への追加を見た。彼女は自分の印を加えた。彼のを確認してわずかに延長し、南のキビツのラインの狭い隙間を追加した。親鸞ではない。ナンセイス。パーカー・アミンは彼女を見た。彼女は彼を見た。彼は家族に向いた。南水と彼は英語で言った。部族の共有語彙に方向を植え付けながら、同時に家族にそれを伝えて、T-Rex は南市からアプローチするが最も高い。Danger Southwest 若い音は言った。Yes! とパーカー・アミンは言った。共有の警告システムとパーカー・アミンは言い、洞窟の入り口の方向を指さした。私がランと言ったら全員走る。洞窟へ一緒に実演した。Run, caves, 洞窟 together 一緒に。Run, caves, north together 走れ洞窟一緒にと若い男は言った。どうと立った。フラットな手のジェスチャーを作った指を揃えて鋭い下向きのプレッシャー。パーカー・メアリーを見た。ハイドク隠れると彼女は言った。洞窟女はジェスチャーをもう一度見せた。それから地面を指した。それからジェスチャーをまた胸の高さで作ってった。この信号を出したら低く行け、静止しろ、消えろ。ハイドとパーカー・メアリーは言い、ジェスチャーを返した。洞窟女は覗いた。これが最初の不言語の生存システムだとチェンバース・アメアは言った。静かに、特に誰にでもなく、英語は言語コマンドのため、彼らのジェスチャー言語は視覚信号のため、両方が同時に動作している。それぞれが他方が運べないものを運んでいる。日本語の習熟、夜見部族は夜のリズムに落ち着いた。パーカー・アミンは一人ずつ家族を動いた。グループ授業ではなく個別評価。パーカー・メアリーに最初に言った日本語の文を生み出した中程度の複雑さって形の構造。水を取ってきてくれますか？水を取ってきてくれますか？パーカー・メアリーはそれを返した。発音はネイティブに近かった。敬語の登録、文が構築されている丁寧な要求形は存在して正確だった。とてもいいと彼は日本語で言った微笑んだ。ブラウン・カサンドラに言った。より複雑な文を与えた。手勝ちし、方向の助詞、埋め込まれた時間要素を必要とする文。彼女はすぐに生み出した。一時停止なし。目に見える処理なし。文は意識的な構築が起こる場所の下から完全に正確に到着した。彼は彼女の目を保持した。あなたが思っているより先に進んでいる。彼女は理解した。パーカー・プリンセスに言った。その日を通して 最速の記憶速度を持つ彼女に、速いフラッシュの語彙アイテムの連続を与えた。彼女は保持した。完璧に、一つのアイテムを自分で完成させることさえ予測して、構造の始まりを聞いて自分でそれを完成させた。パターンを聞いたと彼は言った。2日前にと彼女は言った。チェンバース・アメアに言った。日本語習得の最も強い要素が常に理解だった彼に。一時停止なしに通常の会話速度で長い話言葉の段落で今日テストし、チェンバース・アメアが聞いたものを説明するよう求めた。チェンバース・アメアの説明はすべての実質的な詳細において正確だった。あなたの理解は生産とは異なるレベルにある。と、パーカー・アミンは言った。知っています。と、チェンバース・アメアは言った。文法はレセプションより生成で私にとってより明確だ。システムとして理解している。生成はシステムを意図的ではなく自動的になることを必要とする。それにはより多くの時間がかかる。生成を練習し続けろとパーカー・アミンは言った。システムはすでにそこにあるセントパー。兄弟に言った。ユニットとしてテストした。緊急フレーズの連続を与え、フルスピードで調整された同時生産を求めた。彼らはそれを生み出した。一緒に、一つの声のように、最後にパーカー・プリンスに言った。パーカー・アミンは文を生み出した。敬語、誰かの位置を尊重して話す言語。パーカー・プリンスは聞いた。返した。音は完璧ではなかった。発音はより硬い端を持っていた。しかし、構造は正確で意味は完全だった。パーカー・アミンは何も言わなかった。次のテストに進んだだけだった。パーカー・プリンスは発表せずにもう一度文を好みた。今回はより柔らかく、不穏がわずかに解放された。エッジが引き戻された。より良かった。それに気づいたことを認めなかった。単純に修正した生産を表情に保持して、パーカー・アミンが気づいたかどうかを見た。パーカー・アミンは気づいた。コメントなしに進んだ。夜明け、段階的に静かになった。最初に虫が減り、それから大きな生き物の遠い呼び声が変わり、それから太古の夜が生み出す特定の暗闇の質。人工的な光源によってフィルタリングされない絶対的な、完全な暗闇。パーカー・メアリーは主要な火に座っていた。羽のある恐竜は彼女の側に押し付けていた。前夜の T-Rex 号の不安な押し付けではなく、これが安全が住む場所だと決め生き物の落ち着いた快適な押し付け。洞窟女は火の向こうに座っていた。パーカー・プリンセスは静かにパーカー・メアリーの隣に座った。彼女は止まらないと彼女は静かに言った。休んでいても見ている。彼女は一生それをしてきたとパーカー・メアリーは言った。知っている。批判しているのではない。学んでいる。パーカー・メアリーは娘を見た。何を学んでいるの？警戒は緊張のように見える必要はないとパーカー・プリンセスは言った。彼女は完全に警戒していて同時に完全に落ち着いている。それらが反対だと思っていた。パーカー・メアリーはしばらく静かだった。十分に練習すると同じものになると彼女は言った。方向は警告なしに来た。南からではない。洞窟女の地図が最も確率の高いアプローチと示した方向からではない。東からパーカー・アミンが記した第二の可能なアプローチベクターから選択肢がある。選んでいる。方向は単一の生きた存在から来るには深すぎ、共鳴しすぎ、巨大すぎる地質学的なものとして谷を通り抜けた。お念の面で跳ね返り、自分自身の登録反響として戻ってきた。部族はそれが帰るのにかかった時間で立っていた。パーカー家族は体系にいた。洞窟女は領域の東端に槍を上げ、音の方向を読んでいた。静止した。誰もが静止した。聞いた。方向は領域の外から来た。ジャングルから、東の木々のライン、暗闇の中のどこかから。内側ではなかった。攻撃していなかった。発表していた。尾根の上に登っていた月明かりの中で、菱の木のラインの端で、太古のジャングルが領域の清掃された境界と出会う場所で、 何かが立っていた。3秒間、それは木に戻る前に見えた。3秒は十分だった。T レックスはこうやって立っていた。前進していない。後退していない。立って、選ばれた点に到着して、到着したものを評価している何かの特定の質で、その目は領域全体から加工を使えた。二つの反射。巨大。何かが取ることを決める前に理解することを決めた。深い動物の知性の琥珀色のミリリ。火を見た。部族の体型を見た。槍が上がり、体が組織され、準備した集団の防衛的な配置。体型の中の12の小さな人物を見た。バホで体型の端に立つパーカー・アミンを見た。彼の特性的な絶対的な静けさで放狂した。一つの長い深いドアリの宣言。あなたがどこにいるか知っている。あなたのパターンを知っている。あなたの人、体型と境界を知っている。戻ってくる。私の条件で準備ができたとき。それから暗闇がそれを取った。東のキビティのラインが閉じた。音が小さくなった。領域は息を保持した。パーカー・アミンが準備の位置から手を下げるまで。洞窟女が槍を下げるまで。羽のある恐竜がパーカー・メアリーの足に押し付けて、凍りついた警戒からただ警戒への緩やかな移行をするまで。若い男は日越しにパーカー・メアリーを見た。T レックス蒲田来ると彼は尋ねた。パーカー・メアリーは東のキビトのラインを見た。巨大な何かが立って彼らを見て前進するのではなく去ることを選んだ暗闇を。Yes! はいと彼女は言った。And we'll come again. Ready.質問してる言った。質問、声明として。決断の締まりと締めとして。パーカー・メアリーは彼を見た。Yes! はいと彼女は言った。We will be ready. 準備するだろうと。火は燃えた。谷は息をした。そして東のジャングルのどこかで自分のペースと自分の計算で太古の暗闇を動いて、T レックスは識別した領域の周回を続けた。学んでいた。自分の瞬間を選んでいた。この世界での生存の言語は言葉だけで話されているのではなかった。第3話終わり。戦争の最初の言葉。